The arena of the broken was where you went when the world wanted you erased. And as Vedra stood on the blood-stained sand, surrounded by howling crowds who had paid good silver to watch her suffer, she did something no one expected. She refused to fall. They sent wolves first. Then fire. Then men with chains and iron rods. But every blow that should have shattered her seemed to dissolve against her skin, swallowed by something no one could name. The crowd's jeers turned to whispers. The whispers turned to fear. And in the royal gallery, where the Alpha King had sat motionless for 3 years like a man carved from winter itself, something impossible happened. He stood. Enough, King Varric commanded, and the entire arena fell silent. His gray eyes fixed on the woman who should have been broken, who should have been bleeding, who should have been begging. Instead, she stood with her chin raised and her silver-white eyes blazing with defiance. "Bring her to me," he said. No one understood why a king who had refused every alliance, every bride, and every connection for 3 years would claim a condemned criminal from the arena floor. No one understood what he saw in her. Neither did Vedra. Not until he made his terms clear. He would protect her, shelter her, give her a place in his court. But she must never ask why his skin was cold. She must never ask why his wolf had gone silent. And she must never, under any circumstances, try to save him. Neither of them understood how impossible that final condition would become. The arena of the broken had no formal name. The people of Valdris simply called it the pit, and everyone knew what that meant. It was where the kingdom sent its refuse, criminals too insignificant for proper execution, debtors who couldn't pay, women who had shamed their families in ways that demanded public punishment. And today, it held Vedra. She stood at the center of the sand circle, her wrists still raw from the shackles they'd removed only moments ago. Around her, the stone walls rose 30 feet high, packed with spectators on every level. Merchants and nobles and common folk alike, all of them hungry for the same thing: entertainment. "This one's small," someone shouted from the lower galleries. "She won't last 5 minutes." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Vedra didn't react. She'd learned long ago that showing fear only made predators hungrier. So she stood perfectly still, her face blank, her bound hair hanging in a matted rope down her back. She looked like nothing, a wisp of a woman in torn gray cloth, barefoot on cold sand. Exactly what her stepfather had intended. Lord Brennick sat somewhere in those galleries. She could feel his eyes on her, greedy and satisfied. He'd waited 3 years for her mother to die. 3 years of patience, of playing the devoted husband, of pretending he didn't know what Vedra was. And the moment her mother's heart stopped beating, he'd made his move. Condemned for witchcraft, he'd told the magistrate. Condemned for bearing the eyes of the Ashborn. The Ashborn. A bloodline that had been hunted to extinction 2 centuries ago. Bringers of ruin, the old texts called them. Devourers of kingdoms. Monsters wearing human skin. All because of their eyes. Vedra had spent her entire life hiding hers, wearing dark glasses in public, keeping her head down, letting her mother's careful lies protect her. But Lord Brennick had found the glasses in her room after the funeral. He'd seen the truth. And now everyone would. "Remove her blindfold," the arena master called out. Vedra's stomach clenched. They'd bound a strip of black cloth over her eyes when they'd dragged her from the prison cart, claiming it was tradition. But she knew the real reason. They wanted the reveal to be dramatic. Rough hands grabbed her shoulders. Fingers worked at the knot behind her head. And then the cloth fell away, and Vedra blinked against the sudden light. The crowd gasped. Her eyes were silver white, not gray, not pale blue. Silver, like molten moonlight, with no visible pupil at all. In the bright arena sun, they seemed to glow. "Ashborn," someone breathed. The word spread through the galleries like wildfire. Ashbourne, Ashbourne, Ashbourne. She could see hands making warning signs, mothers pulling children closer, men reaching for weapons they weren't allowed to carry in the arena. Good. Let them be afraid. Release the first trial. The arena master shouted, and a gate on the far side of the sand circle groaned open. 3 wolves prowled out. Not shifters. True wolves, enormous and scarred, bred for exactly this purpose. Their eyes were wrong, milky and vacant. Arena wolves were starved for days before a trial, then fed herbs that drove them mad with hunger. They would attack anything that moved. The largest wolf spotted Vedra and snarled, saliva dripping from yellowed fangs. The other 2 flanked it, spreading wide, cutting off her escape routes. Not that there was anywhere to escape to. Vedra took a breath. Then another. The wolves charged. What happened next would be debated in Valdris for years. Some said she moved so fast they couldn't track her. Others swore she didn't move at all. But the wolves that should have torn her apart instead seemed to hit an invisible wall 3 feet from her body. They yelped, stumbled backward, and shook their massive heads in confusion. Then they tried again. And again. Each time, the same result. Each time, Vedra stood perfectly still, her silver eyes blazing, her expression unchanging. The wolves couldn't touch her. No matter how many times they lunged, no matter how hard they tried, they simply couldn't. The crowd had gone silent. Fire! Lord Brennick's voice rang out from somewhere above. Use fire. Ashbourne are supposed to burn. The arena master hesitated, glancing toward the royal gallery. But whoever sat up there gave no objection, so he raised his hand. A moment later, torches were being lit along the arena wall. Forgive me, Vedra whispered to no one, for what I'm about to do. The archers drew back, their arrows wrapped in oil-soaked rags and burning bright. They aimed at the small figure standing alone on the sand. And they fired. Vedra raised her hands. The fire struck her palms and stopped. Not extinguished, not deflected. It simply hung there, suspended in the air before her, ribbons of flame coiling around her fingers like living things. Then she pushed. The fire exploded outward in every direction, slamming into the arena walls with enough force to crack stone. The crowd screamed, scrambling backward, trampling each other in their panic to escape. The wolves fled through their open gate, howling, but Vedra still stood, untouched, unburned, her silver eyes brighter than ever. Impossible, the arena master stammered. That's impossible. And then a voice cut through the chaos, a voice like winter wind, cold and absolute and utterly calm. Enough. Every head turned toward the royal gallery. The Alpha King was standing. In 3 years, no one had seen King Varric stand during a public function. He arrived. He sat. He observed with those empty gray eyes, his face revealing nothing, his body so still he might have been carved from ice. Then he left. The court whispered that he was dying, that some secret illness was draining him from within, that his wolf had gone silent and his heart had frozen solid. Some said he was cursed. Others said he was simply broken, shattered by something that had happened during the war, something no one dared speak of openly. But whatever the truth, everyone agreed on one thing: the Alpha King did not engage. With anything. With anyone. Until now. Varric descended from the royal gallery with slow, deliberate steps. The crowd parted before him like water before a ship's prow. Even the arena master scrambled backward, bowing so deeply his forehead nearly touched the sand. Vedra watched him approach. She should have been terrified. This was the most powerful wolf in 5 kingdoms, a man who had conquered nations before his 25th year, whose name was spoken in the same breath as death itself. But she couldn't feel fear. She couldn't feel anything except the strange, hollow exhaustion that always followed when she used her power. The power she'd hidden her entire life. The power her mother had begged her never to reveal. Too late for that now. The king stopped 6 feet away. He was tall, taller than she'd expected, with pale blonde hair that fell past his shoulders and a face that might have been beautiful if it held any warmth at all. But his skin was white as marble. His lips were nearly colorless, and his eyes, gray as storm clouds, held no light whatsoever. Cold, Vedra thought. Everything about him is cold. "Your name," he said. Not a question, a command. "Vedra." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Vedra Thornwood." Thornwood. Something flickered in those dead eyes. "I knew that name once. Your mother was Isel Thornwood." Vedra's heart seized. "You knew my mother?" "I knew of her. She was a healer in the eastern provinces, before she married." His gaze moved over Vedra's face, lingering on her eyes. "Before she hid you." The crowd was utterly silent now. Thousands of people holding their breath, watching this impossible exchange between their frozen king and the Ashbourne girl who should have been dead. "Lord Brennick." Varek's voice carried without effort. "Step forward." Movement in the galleries. Vedra turned to see her stepfather descending, his face a careful mask of deference, but she could smell the fear beneath it. Even after 3 years of living in his house, of enduring his contempt, of watching him slowly poison her mother with something the physicians could never identify, she knew that smell. He was afraid. "Good." "Your Majesty." Brennick bowed low. "I can explain. This creature is dangerous, condemned by proper authority. I was only trying to protect the realm from—" "You condemned your stepdaughter to the arena," Varek interrupted, "for the crime of existing." "She's Ashbourne, Your Majesty. The old laws clearly state—" "The old laws were written by men who feared what they couldn't control." Varek's tone didn't change. It remained flat, empty, cold, and somehow that was more terrifying than anger. The Ashbourne were hunted because they could absorb power, because they couldn't be broken, because they made very poor victims. His gray eyes moved back to Vedra. "I have need of someone who cannot be broken." Vedra stared at him. "What?" "You will come with me to the palace. You will be given chambers, clothing, and food. You will want for nothing." He paused, and for just a moment, something that might have been exhaustion crossed his features. "In exchange, you will remain at my side when I require it. You will attend functions with me. You will let the kingdom see that the Alpha King has chosen a companion." "Companion," Vedra repeated slowly. "You mean a pet. I mean a tool." He said it without cruelty, without malice, simply a statement of fact. "I have use for you. You have need of protection. This arrangement benefits us both." "And if I refuse?" Varek glanced at the arena around them, at the scorch marks on the walls, at the crowd still frozen in terrified silence. "Then you walk out of here alone, with every wolf in Valdris knowing what you are." His gaze returned to hers. "How long do you think you'd survive?" Vedra's jaw tightened. He wasn't wrong. She'd revealed herself. There was no hiding now. Every bounty hunter, every fearful villager, every lord who wanted to prove his strength would be coming for her. But this king, this cold, empty, dying king, was offering her shelter. Not out of kindness. He'd made that clear. Out of need. She could live with need. "What are your conditions?" she asked. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, that she was negotiating rather than groveling. "3 rules. First, you will not ask about my health. You will not mention my temperature, my pallor, or my wolf. These topics are forbidden." A curse, Vedra thought. He's definitely cursed. "Second, you will not attempt to heal me, cure me, or save me in any way. Whatever afflicts me is not your concern." That confirmed it. He was dying, and he didn't want to be rescued. "Third," He took a single step closer, and Vedra felt the cold radiating off him like winter mist. You will not touch me without permission. Ever. Vedra met his eyes. Silver against gray. Fire against ice. I agree to your terms, she said quietly. But I have one condition of my own. For the first time, the king's expression showed genuine emotion. Confusion. You're making demands? I'm negotiating. She lifted her chin. Lord Brennick poisoned my mother over the course of 3 years. I watched her waste away while he smiled at her bedside. When this arrangement between us ends, however it ends, I want him to face justice. Real justice. Not the kind that can be bought. Silence stretched between them. Then slowly the corner of Varek's mouth twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was something. Agreed, he said. Lord Brennick will be investigated. If evidence supports your claim, he will answer for it. Vedra released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Then I accept your offer, Your Majesty. Varek extended his hand. Come then. She took it. His palm was ice. Not cool, not chilled. Ice, as if he'd been holding snow for hours. Vedra's ashborn instincts flared, sensing something beneath the surface, something draining, something wrong. But she'd agreed not to ask. So she simply held his frozen hand and let the Alpha King lead her out of the arena, past the silent crowds, past her stepfather's furious face, and into a life she couldn't begin to imagine. Behind them, the whispers started. The palace of Valdris rose from the mountainside like something grown rather than built, all dark stone and spiraling towers and windows that glittered like eyes in the fading light. Vedra had seen it from a distance her entire life, a shadow on the horizon, a symbol of power so far removed from her existence that it might as well have been a myth. Now she was riding through its gates in a carriage marked with the king's seal, wearing the same torn gray dress she'd been arrested in, with blood still dried beneath her fingernails. The servants will draw you a bath, Varek said from the seat across from her. He hadn't looked at her since they'd entered the carriage. His gaze remained fixed on the window, watching the palace approach with an expression of absolute nothing. You'll be given appropriate clothing. A meal will be brought to your chambers. And then? Then you'll rest. His tone suggested the conversation was over, but Vedra had never been good at reading suggestions. Your Majesty, you said you have need of someone who cannot be broken, but you haven't explained what that means. Varek's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I said you will remain at my side when required. That is all you need to know. You're using me as armor. The realization crystallized suddenly. You need protection, and you think my power provides it. Your power. He turned to look at her for the first time since they'd left the arena. Those gray eyes held nothing, reflected nothing. You absorb force, redirect energy. The wolves couldn't touch you. The fire obeyed you. You're a living shield. I'm not a weapon. No, he agreed. You're a tool. I told you that already. The carriage stopped. Varek rose without waiting for the door to open, stepping out into the torchlit courtyard. Vedra followed more slowly, her bare feet stinging against the cold stone. Servants lined the entrance, bowing as their king passed. Their eyes flickered to Vedra with undisguised curiosity, taking in her matted hair, her torn dress, her silver-white eyes. She could smell their wariness, sharp and metallic beneath the perfumed air. This is Vedra Thornwood, Varek's voice carried across the courtyard. She is my guest. She will be treated with the same respect afforded any member of the court. Anyone who fails in this regard will answer to me personally. Silence. Then the servants bowed again. Lower this time, their wariness shifting to something more complicated. Fear, Vedra realized. Not of her. Of him. What kind of king inspired this much terror? A steward appeared, an older woman with steel-gray hair and a face that revealed nothing. Your Majesty, shall I escort your guest to the eastern chambers? The northern wing? Varric was already walking, near my own. The steward's expression flickered just for an instant. Surprise, concern. Then it smoothed away, and she bowed. Of course, Your Majesty. This way, my lady. My lady. Vedra almost laughed. 6 hours ago, she'd been a condemned criminal. Now she was being addressed with honorifics. The palace interior was overwhelming. Vaulted ceilings painted with scenes of ancient battles, tapestries taller than houses, chandeliers dripping with crystals that caught the torchlight and scattered it into rainbows. Vedra had grown up in a modest estate, comfortable but never lavish. This was something else entirely. This was power made visible. Your chambers, my lady. The steward opened a heavy oak door, revealing a sitting room larger than Vedra's entire childhood home. Beyond it, she could glimpse a bedchamber, a bathing room, a private balcony overlooking the mountain valley below. This is mine? For as long as you remain in the king's favor. The steward's voice was carefully neutral. I'll send maids to assist with your bath. Dinner will be served in 1 hour. Then she was gone, and Vedra stood alone in the impossible luxury, trying to make sense of a day that had begun in a prison cell and ended in a palace. The bath helped. Hot water and rose-scented oils, washing away the arena's grime. The maids were efficient and silent, dressing her in a sleeping gown of soft ivory silk before departing with small bows. Vedra sat before the fire in her new chambers, watching the flames dance, feeling emptier than she had in months. Her mother was dead. Her home was gone. Her stepfather walked free, at least for now. And she had traded one cage for another, prettier one, but at least this cage came with warmth, with food, with the faint possibility of justice. A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. Enter, she called, expecting a servant with dinner. The door opened. The Alpha King stepped through. Vedra rose quickly, her heart hammering. He'd changed from his formal clothing into something simpler, a dark tunic and leather trousers, his pale hair unbound around his shoulders. In the firelight, his skin looked even more colorless, almost translucent. Your Majesty, she managed. I didn't expect. I came to give you this. He held out his hand. A silver chain dangled from his fingers, a small pendant attached. It looked like a stylized wolf, curled in on itself. It marks you as being under my protection. Wear it at all times. Vedra took the chain carefully, making sure not to touch his skin. The metal was warm, which seemed strange given how cold he was. Thank you, she said quietly. Varric nodded once, already turning to leave. But at the door, he paused. His hand rested on the frame, and for a moment, just a moment, his shoulders seemed to sag beneath an invisible weight. You asked why I chose you, he said without turning. You stood in that arena and took everything they threw at you. Fire, wolves, hatred, and you didn't fall. Vedra waited. I've been looking for someone like that for 3 years. His voice dropped, softer than she'd heard it. Someone who cannot be broken, because I need to believe such people exist. Then he was gone. Vedra stared at the closed door for a long time, the silver pendant cold in her palm. She thought about his words, about the exhaustion beneath them, about the way his hand had trembled almost imperceptibly against the doorframe. Someone who cannot be broken. He wasn't looking for a shield, she realized. He wasn't looking for a tool. He was looking for proof that survival was possible. And for the first time since they'd dragged her into the arena, Vedra felt something other than fear or exhaustion. She felt curious. What happened to you? She wondered. That left you this cold? She fastened the pendant around her neck. Outside her window, snow began to fall. The first week passed in a strange haze of luxury and isolation. Vedra had everything she could want. Food, warmth, beautiful clothing, a bed softer than clouds. But she had no purpose, no direction, no understanding of why she was truly here. The king had said she would remain at his side when required, but he hadn't required her once. She glimpsed him occasionally, crossing a courtyard or disappearing down a corridor. Always surrounded by advisors, always wrapped in that impenetrable coldness. He never looked at her, never acknowledged her existence at all. It was maddening. "You're pacing again, my lady." The voice came from the doorway. Vedra turned to find a young woman watching her with barely concealed amusement. She had copper-red hair and freckles scattered across her nose, and she wore the simple gray dress of a palace servant. "I'm Niara. The king assigned me to attend you." "Attend me?" Vedra stopped pacing. "I don't need attending." "Everyone needs attending." Niara stepped into the room, carrying a tray of tea and small cakes, especially those who spend their days wearing holes in expensive carpets. Despite herself, Vedra smiled. It was the first genuine smile she'd managed since her mother's death. "I'm going mad," she admitted. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do here." Niara set the tray down and began pouring tea. "You're supposed to wait. That's what companions do." "I'm not a companion. He called me a tool." "Did he?" Niara's eyebrows rose. "That's more than he's said to most people in 3 years." She handed Vedra a cup. "The king doesn't speak to anyone unless he must. The fact that he's spoken to you at all is remarkable." Vedra wrapped her hands around the warm porcelain, thinking. "What happened to him? 3 years ago, you said. Something changed." Niara's expression shuddered. "That's not for me to say, my lady." "Then who can tell me?" "No one." The servant's voice dropped. "No one who values their position or their life." A chill ran down Vedra's spine, not from fear, from recognition. She knew what it looked like when an entire household was terrified into silence. She'd lived it for 3 years under Lord Brennick's roof. That night, Vedra couldn't sleep. She lay in her enormous bed, staring at the canopy above, listening to the wind howl against the windows. Snow had fallen steadily since her arrival, blanketing the mountains in white. The palace was warm, fires burning in every hearth, but she could feel the cold pressing against the walls like something alive, something hungry. A sound made her sit up. Footsteps in the corridor outside her door. Slow, uneven, stumbling. Vedra rose, wrapping a robe around her shoulders. She crossed to the door and opened it just a crack. The king stood in the hallway. He was leaning against the wall, one hand pressed to his chest, his face contorted with pain. Frost coated his eyelashes. His breath came in shallow, ragged gasps, each exhale forming clouds of mist in the air. "Your Majesty." Vedra pulled the door open fully. "What's wrong?" His head snapped toward her. For a moment his eyes were wild, unfocused, like a wounded animal. Then recognition flickered through, and he straightened with visible effort. "Go back to bed," he said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "This doesn't concern you. You're in pain." "I said go back to bed." Vedra stepped into the corridor instead. "You're freezing. You're barely standing. How does that not concern me when you brought me here specifically because you're useful?" He cut her off, pushing away from the wall. "Because you can deflect arrows and absorb fire. Not because you're a healer, not because you can help with this." He took a step and stumbled. Vedra moved without thinking, catching his arm before he could fall. The cold hit her like a physical blow. It wasn't just temperature. It was something deeper. Something that reached into her ashborn senses and screamed wrongness. Energy was draining out of him, bleeding away like heat from an open wound. Something was eating him from the inside. Something was consuming his very essence. "Let go." Varric tried to pull away. "You can't. I can feel it." Vedra's voice came out strange, distant, Her power was reacting to him, trying to absorb the damage, trying to redirect the flow. There's something inside you. Something feeding. Varric went rigid. You can feel that? I can feel everything. Her silver eyes met his gray ones. Ashborn don't just deflect force, we sense energy. All kinds of energy. And whatever is happening to you, it's not an illness. He stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, the fight went out of him. No, he said quietly. It's not an illness. Vedra released his arm and the wrongness faded, but the memory of it lingered, cold and terrible. Can you walk? She asked. Yes. He straightened again, but this time he didn't push her away. My chambers are at the end of this corridor. She walked beside him in silence, matching his slow pace. When they reached his door, he paused with his hand on the handle. You broke your promise, he said. Which one? The one about not touching me. Vedra's cheeks flushed. You were falling. Would you have preferred I let you hit the floor? The corner of his mouth twitched. That same, almost smile she'd seen in the arena. No, I suppose not. He opened the door and Vedra caught a glimpse of the room beyond. Dark wood and darker tapestries, a massive bed draped in black, a fire burning so large it should have made the space sweltering. But even from the doorway, she could feel the cold pouring out of it. Good night, Vedra, Varric said quietly. Then he closed the door between them. Vedra stood in the corridor for a long time, her mind racing. He was being consumed. Something was draining him, feeding on him, killing him slowly from within. And he knew it. He'd known for 3 years, and he'd told no one. He'd simply decided to die in silence. Why? She wondered. Why won't you let anyone help you? She returned to her chambers, but sleep didn't come until nearly dawn. And when it did, she dreamed of ice spreading through a wolf's heart, freezing it solid, one beat at a time. After that night, everything changed. The king began summoning her. At first, it was formal occasions, state dinners where she stood at his side, her silver eyes making the visiting dignitaries nervous. Council meetings where her presence seemed to unsettle even his own advisors. She said nothing during these events, simply stood behind his chair like a silent sentinel, and somehow that was enough. They're afraid of you, Varric observed one evening after a particularly tense negotiation. They were walking through the palace gardens, snow crunching beneath their boots. He'd started requesting her company for these walks a week ago, and Vedra hadn't found the courage to ask why. They're afraid of what I might do, she corrected. There's a difference. Is there? He glanced at her, and for once, his gray eyes held something other than emptiness. Curiosity, perhaps, or something close to it. Being feared for your potential isn't the same as being feared for your actions. Vedra kept her gaze on the snow-covered roses ahead. You know that better than anyone. Varric said nothing for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. What do you know about the War of the Northern Reach? Only what everyone knows. You conquered 3 kingdoms in 2 years. You were called the Winter Wolf, the Frostblade, the Butcher of Thornwall. He finished the list without emotion. That one was always my favorite. Vedra stopped walking. You're not a butcher. How would you know? He turned to face her, and the setting sun painted his pale features in shades of gold and rose. It made him look almost human, almost warm. You've known me for 3 weeks. I know that a butcher wouldn't check on my comfort every morning. A butcher wouldn't assign me the gentlest servant in the palace. A butcher wouldn't walk through gardens with a condemned criminal just to escape his own thoughts. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the cold radiating from his body. You're not what they say you are. Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe. Or grief. I was, he said quietly. Once, during the war, I was exactly what they say. I did things that would horrify you. His jaw tightened. Things that horrified me. And then? And then I came home. He turned away, resuming the walk. And everything was different. I was different. And no one could see it except me. Vedra followed him, her mind churning. He'd changed during the war. Or after it. Something had broken inside him. Something that still bled 3 years later. Is that when the cold started? She asked carefully. Varric stopped. His shoulders tensed. For a long moment she thought he would refuse to answer, would retreat behind his walls as he always did. Instead he said, "My wolf went silent the night Thornwall burned." Vedra's breath caught. A wolf going silent was the worst fate a shifter could face. It meant their animal half had withdrawn completely, retreating so deep inside that it might never emerge again. Wolves went silent when they were traumatized beyond recovery. When they'd done something so terrible that their own nature rejected them. Or when they were being consumed by something dark. "You blame yourself," she said, "for what happened at Thornwall. Blame implies I might be wrong." His voice was flat. "I'm not wrong. The blood is on my hands. The cold is my punishment." "Punishment from who?" He didn't answer. But his hand moved to his chest, pressing over his heart, and Vedra understood. From himself. Whatever curse was eating him, he believed he deserved it. He wasn't fighting it because he thought he should suffer. He wasn't looking for a cure because he wanted to die. Not from disease. From guilt. Varek. His name came out before she could stop it. Not Your Majesty. Just his name. He turned, and his eyes widened slightly at the familiarity, but he didn't correct her. "You can't punish yourself forever," she said. "Whatever happened at Thornwall, whatever you did, it doesn't mean you deserve this. You don't know what I did. Then tell me." She stepped closer, closer than she'd ever dared. "Tell me, and let me decide whether you deserve to die for it." For an endless moment they stood in the snow-covered garden, the cold king and the ash-born girl, their breath forming clouds between them. Vedra could feel his energy, dim and fading, like a fire burning down to embers. Then Varric reached out and touched her face. His palm was ice against her cheek, but his fingers were gentle, so gentle, tracing the line of her jaw as if she were something precious, something he was afraid to break. "You're warm," he murmured. I'd forgotten what warmth felt like. Vedra's heart hammered. "Varric, come to my chambers tonight." The words came out rough, uncertain. Not for warmth. Not for... I just don't want to be alone. For once. I don't want to face the cold alone. She should refuse. This was dangerous. Getting close to a man who was dying, who wanted to die, and who had built walls so high that no one could reach him. But she thought of him in the corridor, frost on his lashes and pain in his eyes. She thought of the way he'd looked at her in the arena, as if she were proof that survival was possible. "Yes," she said quietly. That night she went to him. There was no seduction, no grand romantic gestures. She simply lay beside him on his enormous bed, her body pressed against his frozen one, her warmth bleeding into his cold. His arms wrapped around her like she was the only anchor in a storm. "You're like fire," he whispered against her hair. "I should pull away. I should protect you from this." "I'm Ashborn," she reminded him. "I don't need protection." "Everyone needs protection." His lips brushed her temple. "Even those who can't be broken." They lay tangled together until dawn, sharing warmth and silence. And when the morning light crept through the curtains, Vedra realized something that terrified her more than any arena ever could. She was falling in love with him. Over the following weeks, it became a pattern. Days of formal duties, evenings of quiet walks, nights of shared warmth in his frozen chambers. He began talking to her about the kingdom, about politics, about problems he'd never discussed with anyone. She offered perspectives he hadn't considered. He actually listened. "You'd make a formidable queen," he said one night, half asleep, his face buried against her neck. Vedra's heart stuttered. "What?" But he was already unconscious, his breathing even, his body slightly warmer than usual. She lay awake for hours, replaying that single word. Queen. 2 months later, she missed her bleeding. Then she missed it again. The healer confirmed what Vedra already suspected, her face carefully neutral as she delivered the news. "You're with child, my lady. Perhaps 6 weeks along." Vedra sat in her chambers long after the healer left, her hands resting on her stomach, her mind spinning. A child. His child. Growing inside her. She should be happy. Part of her was happy. But beneath the joy was something colder. He'd never wanted this. He'd never asked for an heir, never discussed the future, and never implied that their arrangement was anything more than temporary. He was still dying. He was still consumed by his curse. And now she carried his child, a complication he'd never planned for. What if this changes everything? She wondered. What if he sends me away? The door opened. Varek stepped inside, and one look at her face told him something was wrong. "What is it?" He crossed to her immediately, kneeling before her chair. "Are you ill? Did something happen?" Vedra met his eyes, those gray eyes that had slowly, over 2 months, begun to hold light again. Warmth again. Something that looked terrifyingly like love. "I'm pregnant," she said. The world stopped. Varek stared at her. His expression shifted through a dozen emotions in the space of a heartbeat. Shock, fear, wonder, grief, and finally, something that made her chest ache. Hope. "A child," he breathed. "Our child." "Yes." Her voice trembled. "I understand if you want to end our arrangement. I never intended to." "End it?" He looked stricken. "Vedra, why would I end it?" "Because you're dying." The words came out sharper than she intended. "Because you've never promised me tomorrow, let alone a lifetime. Because this child deserves a father who plans to live." Varek flinched as if she'd struck him. "You're right," he said quietly. "The child deserves that. You both do." He took her hands in his cold ones. "I've been selfish, keeping you here, letting you warm me night after night, knowing I have no future to offer. Then change it." Vedra gripped his fingers tightly. "Fight. Whatever this curse is, whatever is consuming you, stop accepting it. Stop believing you deserve to die." Pain flashed across his features. "You don't understand. The curse isn't something I can fight. It's something I chose." Vedra went still. "What do you mean, chose?" "I mean, I asked for it." His voice broke. "After Thornwall, after what I did, I couldn't live with myself. So I sought out a witch. I asked her to freeze my heart, to kill the part of me that felt anything." He paused, his jaw tightening. "But I've always wondered how she knew exactly where to find me, how she knew what I needed before I spoke a word." His eyes grew distant. "The cold isn't a punishment from the gods. It's a punishment I created, and I have no idea how to undo it." The revelation hit Vedra like a physical blow. He'd cursed himself, deliberately, because he couldn't bear his own guilt. And now, 3 years later, that curse was killing him. "Why are you telling me this?" she whispered. Varek opened his eyes. They were wet. She'd never seen him cry before. "Because you asked me to fight," he said. "Because for the first time since Thornwall, I want to. Because you make me want to live, Vedra." His hands tightened on hers. "And that terrifies me more than dying ever did." The following weeks were the happiest of Vedra's life, and also the most frightening. Varek was trying. For the first time in 3 years, he was genuinely trying to fight the curse that was consuming him. He sought out records of the witch who'd cast it. He consulted with healers and scholars and anyone who might have knowledge of frost magic. But nothing worked. The cold continued to spread. His skin grew paler, his movements grew slower. And at night, Vedra could feel the ice creeping through his veins, claiming more of him with each passing day. She tried everything her Ashborn abilities allowed. She pressed her warmth against him, trying to absorb the curse's energy, trying to redirect it away from his heart. Sometimes it helped. Sometimes she could push the cold back, buy him a few hours of relief, but it always returned, stronger each time. Stop. Varric caught her wrists one night as she pressed her palms to his chest. You're exhausting yourself. I don't care. Vedra's silver eyes blazed. I won't watch you die when I might be able to help. You can't absorb a self-inflicted curse. His voice was gentle, gentler than she'd ever heard it. It's tied to my soul, not just my body. As long as I believe I deserve to suffer, the curse has power. Then stop believing it. I've tried. He pulled her hands away, pressing kisses to her knuckles. Every day since you told me about the child, I've tried. But 3 years of guilt doesn't vanish in weeks. Vedra's throat tightened. What about the witch? The one who cast it? Dead. She was ancient even then. The villagers told me she passed the following winter. There must be someone else. Another witch? Another way? There is no other way. Varric cupped her face in his cold hands. Vedra, my fire, my light. I need you to prepare yourself for the possibility that I won't survive this. No. The word came out fierce, desperate. You don't get to give up. Not now. Not when we have a child coming. Not when I... She stopped. Not when you what? His gray eyes searched hers. Vedra had sworn she wouldn't say it. She'd promised herself she would keep this one truth buried, protect herself from the devastation of loving someone who was dying. But the words refused to stay hidden. Not when I love you, she whispered. Varric went completely still. I love you, Vedra repeated, stronger now. I love your coldness and your guilt and your broken heart. I love the way you check on me every morning. The way you ask my opinion about everything. The way you hold me at night like I'm the only thing keeping you tethered to this world. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I didn't plan to love you. I didn't want to love someone who was determined to die, but I do. I love you, Varric. And I need you to fight. Not for yourself. For me. For our child. For the kingdom that still needs its king. Silence stretched between them. Varric stared at her, and she watched something shift in his expression. Something cracking open, breaking free, rising to the surface after 3 years of being frozen solid. I love you, he said. The words came out rough, broken, like he'd forgotten how to form them. I love you, Vedra. I've loved you since the arena, since you stood there burning with defiance and refused to fall. I've loved you since you touched my arm in that corridor and felt my curse and didn't run. His voice cracked. I love you so much it terrifies me, because I know what happens to people I love. They suffer. They break. They... He stopped. His hand flew to his chest. Varric? Vedra grabbed his shoulders. What's wrong? His eyes went wide with pain. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Frost exploded across his skin, spreading from his heart outward, coating his neck, his jaw, his face in crystalline ice. No. Vedra's voice came out as a scream. No. No, no. She pressed her hands against his chest, pouring every ounce of her Ashborn power into him, trying to absorb the curse, trying to redirect the cold. But it was too strong, too fast, too hungry. The curse had activated. The witch! Varric gasped, each word costing him visible effort. She said, if I ever felt love again, the curse would finish what it started. Horror crashed over Vedra. The curse wasn't just punishment for guilt, it was a trap. Feel nothing and survive, feel love and die, and she just made him feel love. You can't die. She was sobbing now, her hands burning against his frozen chest. You can't die. You promised you'd fight. You promised. Vedra. His hand found hers, gripping weakly. I'm sorry. I should have told you. Should have warned you why I kept everyone at distance. Stop talking. Save your strength. I'll find a way to fix this. Listen to me. His gray eyes met hers, already glazing over with frost. The curse. It feeds on my belief that I deserve to die. But you're Ashborn. You absorb energy. Redirect it. I've tried. It doesn't work. Not the curse itself. His grip tightened. The belief. The guilt. If you could absorb that, take it from me. Maybe. His eyes rolled back. Varek! Vedra shook him. Varek, stay with me. Tell me how. Tell me what to do. But he was gone. Not dead. Not yet. She could still feel his heartbeat, faint and slow and weakening by the second. The curse had pulled him under, frozen him from within, and she had no idea how to reach him. Help! She screamed. Someone help me! The king is dying! Guards burst through the door. Servants followed. Within moments, the room was chaos. People shouting, healers being summoned, hands trying to pull her away from his body. Vedra refused to let go. She pressed her forehead to his frozen chest and wept. And somewhere deep inside her, where her Ashborn power coiled like sleeping fire, she felt something stir. An answer. Terrible and beautiful and utterly terrifying. She knew what she had to do. The healers could do nothing. Vedra knew this before they even finished their examinations. She could feel it in the way the curse had settled into Varek's bones, the way the cold had wrapped around his heart like armor. This wasn't a wound that could be stitched, or a fever that could be broken. This was a soul being consumed by its own grief. My lady. The chief healer, an elderly woman named Orinth, approached with hesitation in her eyes. The king still lives, but barely. His heartbeat slows with each hour. At this rate, he has perhaps 3 days. Perhaps less. 3 days. Vedra stood beside his bed, watching frost crystals form on his eyelashes. He looked peaceful in this frozen sleep. Almost beautiful. Like a sculpture of the man she loved, preserved in ice. Leave us, she said quietly. The healers filed out. The servants followed. Even the guards retreated to the corridor, leaving Vedra alone with her dying king. She sat on the edge of the bed and took his frozen hand in hers. You told me to absorb your belief, she whispered. Your guilt. But I don't know how. I don't know what you're guilty of. You've never told me what actually happened at Thornwall. Silence answered her. Vedra closed her eyes and reached for her Ashborn senses. She could feel the curse pulsing inside him, a knot of ice and self-hatred wrapped around his heart. But beneath it, deeper, she sensed something else. Memories. They flickered at the edge of her perception like flames behind frosted glass. Pain, screaming, fire, the smell of burning flesh and the sound of a child crying. She couldn't see them clearly, not without going deeper, not without doing something she'd never attempted before. Ashborn could absorb energy. Everyone knew that. But the oldest texts, the ones her mother had hidden beneath the floorboards of their home, spoke of something more. The ability to absorb not just physical energy but emotional energy, psychic wounds, trauma itself. Her mother had warned her never to try it. It will destroy you, Isel had said, her voice trembling. You'll take their pain into yourself and it will become yours, forever. Promise me you'll never attempt it, Vedra. Promise me. She'd promised, but her mother was dead. And the man she loved was dying. And somewhere inside his frozen heart was the truth she needed to save him. Forgive me, Mother, Vedra whispered. She pressed both hands against Varek's chest, closed her eyes, and dove. The world dissolved. She was standing in fire. Flames roared around her, impossibly hot, devouring everything they touched. Through the smoke, she could see buildings collapsing, people running, and wolves in their shifted forms tearing through streets slick with blood. Thornwall. This was Thornwall. And there, in the center of the destruction, stood Varek. He was younger here, his face unscarred by grief, his eyes bright with battle fury. But something was wrong. He was shouting, his voice lost in the roar of flames, gesturing frantically at his soldiers. "Pull back!" His voice finally reached her, hoarse and desperate. "Those aren't enemy combatants. Those are civilians. Pull back." But his soldiers weren't listening. They moved like men possessed, cutting down everyone in their path, setting fire to homes where families cowered inside. Their eyes were glazed, empty, and wrong. Magic, Vedra realized. Someone had spelled them. "Commander!" A soldier grabbed Varek's arm. His face was familiar, though Vedra couldn't place it. "We need to finish this. No survivors. Those were Lord Brennick's orders." Vedra's blood turned to ice. Lord Brennick. "Brennick has no authority here," Varek snarled. "I command this battalion, and I'm ordering a retreat. These people are innocents." The soldier's hand moved. A blade flashed. And suddenly Varek was staggering backward, a wound opening across his ribs, his own man having turned on him. "Lord Brennick said you might resist," the soldier said calmly. "He said to remind you that your family is in his care, your mother, your sister. If you interfere, they die." Varek's face went white. "You can't stop this," the soldier continued. "The spell has already taken hold. The men will kill until there's no one left to kill. All you can do is choose whether your family survives the night." The memory fractured, jumping forward. Vedra saw Varek on his knees in the ashes, surrounded by bodies, his hands covered in blood that wasn't his. She saw him receive word that his mother and sister were safe, released as promised. She saw him realize the full scope of what had happened. Hundreds dead. An entire town destroyed. And he had stood by and let it happen to protect his family. Brennick had orchestrated everything. The spelled soldiers, the false orders, the massacre blamed on the Winter Wolf's bloodlust. And Varek had taken the guilt onto himself, believing he deserved punishment for not finding another way. For choosing his family over strangers. For being human. The memory shattered, and Vedra gasped back to consciousness. She was on the floor of Varek's chambers, her body shaking, tears streaming down her face. The pain of what she'd witnessed still echoed through her, raw and terrible. But now she understood. The curse fed on a lie. Varek believed he was a monster, a butcher, a man who had slaughtered innocents for glory. But the truth was so much more complicated. He'd been manipulated, threatened, forced to choose between impossible options. And Lord Brennick had walked free for 3 years while Varek slowly froze to death from guilt that was never entirely his to carry. "My lady?" Nyara's voice came from the doorway. "I heard a noise. Are you—" "Fetch the captain of the guard." Vedra rose to her feet, her silver eyes blazing. "And bring me everything we have on Lord Brennick's activities during the Northern War." Nyara's eyes widened. "My lady?" "Now." The next 12 hours were a blur of documents and testimonies, and pieces of a puzzle finally coming together. Lord Brennick had been a minor lord before the war, his holdings small and his influence negligible. But he'd supplied troops to the Northern Campaign, troops that had been present at Thornwall, troops that had returned with gold and promotions and stories of the Winterwolf's savagery. Gold that had purchased Brennick's estate, promotions that had elevated him to the king's inner council. Stories that had isolated Varek in his guilt, ensuring he never investigated too closely. "He planned it all," Vedra said, spreading documents across the table. The captain of the guard, a grizzled wolf named Torvis, stood beside her, his expression growing darker with each revelation. Brennick used spelled soldiers to commit the massacre, then blamed the king. He's been profiting from Thornwall for 3 years. And your mother? Torvis asked quietly. Vedra's jaw tightened. She was a healer in the eastern provinces, near Thornwall. I think she knew something, or discovered something. Brennick married her to keep her close, then poisoned her when she became a threat. And condemned you to the arena to eliminate the last witness. Yes. Vedra looked up at the captain. I need Brennick brought to the palace, immediately, and I need someone who can help with the curse. Torvis frowned. The king told us the witch was dead. The witch who cast the curse is dead, but curses like this don't exist in isolation. Someone taught her. Someone might know how to break it. Vedra's hands clenched into fists. And I found letters in Brennick's records. Letters between him and the witch Morrigan, sent months before the king ever sought her out. Brennick knew Varric would break under the guilt. He positioned Morrigan to intercept him, and he instructed her to add something Varric never asked for. A trigger that would kill him the moment he allowed himself to feel love again. Torvis's face went pale. Brennick engineered all of this? Every piece of it. Vedra's voice was cold. Find me a witch who specializes in frost magic, and bring me Brennick. I don't care if you have to drag him from his bed in chains. As you command, my lady. Torvis bowed. But Vedra, if what you're saying is true, Brennick has powerful allies, moving against him openly. The king is dying. Vedra's voice cut like a blade. I don't have time for caution. Torvis nodded once and departed. Vedra returned to Varric's chambers where the frost had spread further across his body. His breathing was barely perceptible now, his skin so cold that touching him burned. I know the truth, she whispered, pressing her forehead to his frozen one. I know what really happened, and I'm going to make them pay. All of them. She placed her hands on his chest and felt for the curse again. It was still there, still feeding, still consuming. But now that she understood what lay beneath it, she could feel the shape of the lie more clearly. The false belief that he was a monster. The manufactured guilt that had nothing to do with who he truly was. She couldn't absorb his guilt. It wasn't hers to take. But she could show him the truth. She could give him the memories she'd seen, the evidence she'd gathered, the proof that Brennick was the real monster. If only he would wake long enough to receive them. Fight, she begged him. Just a little longer. Give me time to save you. Dawn broke over the mountains, painting the snow in shades of gold and rose, and in the courtyard below, guards arrived with Lord Brennick in chains. Lord Brennick looked smaller in chains. Vedra had remembered him as imposing, a man whose presence filled rooms, whose voice commanded obedience. But standing in the great hall of the palace, surrounded by guards with his fine clothing rumpled from rough handling, he looked like what he truly was, a coward. This is outrageous. Brennick's voice still carried its practiced authority, but fear bled through beneath it. I am a lord of this realm. I demand to speak with the king. The king is indisposed. Vedra descended the steps from the throne, her silver eyes fixed on her stepfather. You'll speak with me instead. Brennick's face twisted. You, the Ashbourne whore who bewitched her way into the king's bed. You have no authority here. I carry the king's heir. Vedra stopped 3 feet away from him. And the king named me regent in the event of his incapacitation. So yes, Lord Brennick, I have authority. I have more authority than you've ever had in your pathetic, scheming life. Murmurs rippled through the assembled court. Nobles and advisors had gathered, summoned by rumors that something momentous was occurring. They watched with hungry eyes, wolves scenting blood. You can't prove anything, Brennick hissed. Can't I? Vedra nodded to Torvis, who stepped forward with a leather satchel. Documents showing your financial dealings before and after Thornwall. Testimony from soldiers who survived the Spelled Battalion, confirming you gave orders that contradicted the king's. Letters between you and the witch Morrigan, discussing the precise specifications of a curse designed to destroy a man from within, including instructions to add a lethal trigger the king never requested. Brennick's face went pale. You arranged the massacre of Thornwall. Vedra continued, her voice carrying through the hall. You framed the king for war crimes to advance your own position. You threatened his family to ensure his silence. And when the guilt you manufactured wasn't killing him fast enough, you positioned a witch to intercept him in his moment of despair and add a death sentence to the curse he sought. Gasps echoed through the court. Lies, Brennick spat. The ravings of a desperate woman trying to save her lover. Then explain this. Vedra held up a small glass vial. Inside, dark liquid swirled like living shadow. This was found in your chambers this morning. The same compound used to poison my mother over 3 years. The same compound currently being analyzed by the royal physicians. Brennick's composure finally cracked. You can't. You have no right. I have every right. Vedra stepped closer, close enough to smell his fear. You killed my mother. You tried to kill me. You've been killing the king for 3 years, and now you'll face justice for all of it. She turned to the guards. Take him to the dungeons. He'll stand trial when the king recovers. If the king recovers, Brennick snarled as they dragged him away. The curse can't be broken. Morrigan designed it that way. He'll die, and you'll die birthing his bastard, and everything I've built will survive. Vedra watched him go, her expression unreadable, but inside, fear coiled around her heart. What if he was right? What if the curse truly couldn't be broken? My lady. A soft voice drew her attention. An old woman stood at the edge of the crowd, wrapped in a traveling cloak, her face weathered by decades of hard living. I believe you sent for me. Vedra frowned. Who are you? My name is Celthis. The woman pushed back her hood, revealing eyes that swirled with frost. Morrigan was my sister, and I believe I can help you save your king. The walk to Varick's chambers felt endless. Celthis moved slowly, her aged body requiring frequent pauses, but her mind was sharp as winter ice. She listened as Vedra explained everything, the curse, the guilt, the truth about Thornwall. My sister was a fool, Celthis said finally. Brilliant, but foolish. She saw a man drowning in grief and offered him a way to stop feeling. She didn't understand that grief needs to be processed, not frozen. And she didn't tell him that Brennick had already paid her to add the love trigger. Can you break the curse? No. Celthis stopped at the door to Varick's chambers. Only he can break it. But you might be able to help him. How? You're Ashborn. The old witch studied Vedra with those frost-swirled eyes. Your kind can absorb energy, redirect it. But the most powerful Ashborn could do something else. They could transfer energy, share it, give their own warmth to someone else. Vedra's breath caught. You're saying I need to give him my fire. I'm saying you need to show him the truth he's been hiding from. Celthis pushed open the door. The curse feeds on his belief that he's a monster. But you've seen his memories. You know he's not. If you can make him see what you've seen, make him feel what you've felt, the belief will collapse. And without the belief, the curse will have nothing to feed on. They entered the chamber. Varick lay exactly as she'd left him, frost covering most of his body now, his heartbeat so faint she could barely detect it. It will be dangerous, Celthis warned. Transferring this much energy could kill you both. If his guilt is stronger than your truth, it will consume you instead. I don't care. Vedra moved to the bed, taking Varick's frozen hand. Tell me what to do. Celthis guided her through the process. How to open herself completely, how to create a bridge between their souls, how to pour everything she was into everything he'd become. Remember, the witch said as Vedra settled beside Varek's body. You're not just giving him warmth, you're giving him your perspective, your love, your certainty that he deserves to live. If there's any doubt in your heart, any hesitation, it will weaken the transfer. Vedra looked down at Varek's frozen face. She thought of the man who had stood in the arena and chosen her. The king who had walked through gardens asking her opinion. The lover who had held her through cold nights, drawing warmth from her body like a drowning man drawing breath. She thought of their child, growing inside her, never knowing its father if she failed. There was no doubt. There was no hesitation. There was only love. I'm ready, she said. Selthis nodded. Then begin. Vedra closed her eyes, pressed her palms against Varek's frozen heart and let herself burn. The transfer was agony. She felt her warmth leaving her body, flowing into his, carrying with it every memory she'd gathered. The truth about Thornwall, the evidence of Brennick's manipulation, the certainty that Varek had been a victim, not a villain. But more than facts, she gave him feelings. The joy she felt when he entered a room, the safety she felt in his arms, the hope she felt for their future, for their child, for the life they could build together. She gave him everything she was, and in return, she felt his guilt. It crashed into her like a wave of ice, the screaming, the burning, the bodies of innocents he hadn't been able to save. 3 years of self-hatred, of believing he was beyond redemption, of punishing himself for crimes that weren't truly his. She absorbed it, all of it, every frozen shard of grief and shame, and then she gave it back. Not as guilt, as grief. There was a difference. Guilt said you deserved to suffer forever. Grief said you had loved, had lost, had survived, and now you needed to heal. She couldn't take away his pain, but she could transform it. It wasn't your fault, she whispered through their bond. You were threatened, manipulated. You made an impossible choice to save people you loved. That's not monstrous. That's human. Somewhere deep in the frozen darkness of his soul, she felt him stir. You don't have to suffer anymore, she continued. You've carried this long enough. Let it go. Come back to me. Come back to our child. Come back and live. For an endless moment, nothing happened. Then the ice began to crack. Vedra felt it first in his heart, a fissure spreading outward, warmth bleeding through where cold had ruled for 3 years. The frost on his skin started to melt, his heartbeat strengthened, and then his eyes opened. Gray eyes, no longer empty. Gray eyes filled with tears. Vedra, he breathed. She collapsed against his chest, sobbing with relief, with exhaustion, with joy so fierce it bordered on pain. You came back, she wept. You came back. His arms wrapped around her, and for the first time since she'd known him, they were warm. 6 months later, spring had come to Valdris. The snow that had blanketed the mountains all winter was finally melting, revealing meadows of wildflowers and streams running swift with snowmelt. The palace gardens burst with color, roses and lilies and flowers Vedra couldn't name, all reaching toward the sun. She sat on a bench beneath a blooming cherry tree, one hand resting on her swollen belly, watching her husband approach. Varek looked different in the sunlight. Healthier, younger. The pallor that had marked his skin for 3 years was gone, replaced by a warm glow that made him look like the man he'd been before the war. Before Brennick. Before the curse. Before everything. The council session ran long. He settled beside her, pressing a kiss to her temple. Lord Torvis wanted to discuss the new training protocols for the guard. And you wanted to escape before they asked your opinion on the flower arrangements for the spring festival. Varek laughed, a sound she still wasn't used to hearing. You know me too well. Vedra leaned against his shoulder, feeling his warmth seep into her. His wolf had returned 3 months ago, emerging slowly from the silence it had retreated into after Thornwall. She could feel it now, a presence beneath his skin, content and protective. "How's the little one?" Varek's hand joined hers on her belly. "Active." Vedra smiled as a kick pressed against their palms. "I think she has your restlessness." "She?" "Intuition." Vedra tilted her head up to look at him. "Though the healers say we won't know for certain until the birth." Varek smiled, that full, genuine smile she'd worked so hard to earn. "A daughter. I'd like that." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the gardens bloom around them. So much had changed since that day in the arena. Brennick had been tried and executed for treason, his lands and titles stripped, his allies scattered. The truth about Thornwall had been made public, clearing Varek's name and exposing the corruption that had festered in his court for years. Niara had been formally appointed as Vedra's personal attendant, her loyalty during those early uncertain weeks rewarded with a permanent position at the Queen's side. The ban on Ashbourne had been lifted, their abilities now recognized as gifts rather than curses. And the witch Selthis had been appointed royal advisor, her knowledge of frost magic proving invaluable in the kingdom's recovery. But the greatest change was simpler than all of that. Varek was alive, he was warm, he was here, and he loved her. "I never thanked you properly," he said quietly, "for saving me." "You've thanked me every day since you woke up." "Not enough." He turned her face toward his, those gray eyes full of everything he'd spent 3 years unable to feel. "You saw me at my worst. Frozen, dying, convinced I deserved to suffer. And you refused to let me go." Vedra touched his cheek. "You would have done the same for me." "I would." He leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers. "I would burn the world to ash for you, Vedra. You and our daughter. You're everything." She kissed him, soft and slow, tasting spring on his lips. When they finally parted, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose and deepest violet. "We should go inside," Vedra said. "Dinner will be ready soon." "In a moment." Varek pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I want to watch the sunset with my wife." Wife. The word still sent warmth flooding through her. They'd married quietly, 2 months after he'd woken from the curse. No grand ceremony, no political spectacle. Just the two of them in the palace chapel, exchanging vows before a handful of witnesses. It had been perfect. "I love you," Vedra said softly. "I love you," Varek answered. And as the stars emerged above them, glittering like scattered diamonds across the velvet sky, Vedra thought about everything they'd survived. The arena, the curse, the frozen heart, and the burning soul. They'd sent her into that pit expecting her to fall. Instead, she'd found a king who needed saving, a love that defied death itself, and a future brighter than anything she'd ever dared imagine. She'd refused to fall that day in the arena, and because she hadn't, neither had he. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, let me know in the comments. Your words mean more than you know. And if you want to hear more stories like this one, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Until next time.